What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So, the college football playoff semifinals are over. So, let's go ahead and break down the key aspects of each game, with this video focusing on the Orange Bowl matchup between Georgia and Michigan in Miami. And so, the first takeaway for me in this game was that Stetson Bennett was the best quarterback on the field in Miami. Going into this game, most people were of the opinion, at least most people that I saw and I interacted with online, were of the opinion that Cade McNamara was the better of the two quarterbacks, or at the very least that they were equally matched quarterbacks. But as we all saw, Stetson Bennett absolutely carved up the Michigan defense for over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, over 10 yards per attempt, no turnovers. Absolutely outstanding game. Meanwhile, McNamara was bad at best, throwing for 106 yards, no touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, around 5 yards per attempt. J.J. McCarthy was somewhat better for Michigan, and he didn't have an interception, but he did score Michigan's only touchdown, but he was still pretty limited in his effectiveness, didn't do anything too crazy, played mostly against Georgia's backups in garbage time at the end of the game, and so I just don't feel like that's a good enough, indication to say. Certainly not to say he was better than Stetson Bennett. So despite all the hate Stetson Bennett had been receiving from a lot of people in the national media and a lot of people in, the Georgia fan base and Georgia media, okay? It's not like Georgia was all behind this guy and, everybody else was hating on him. Georgia was hating on him a lot more than most other people were, which is kind of a shame to see in my opinion. I feel like you should support your own guys no matter what, but that's not the point. The point is Stetson Bennett had the game of his life. He absolutely was the best quarterback on the field, and that is a massive reason why Georgia was able to really blow out Michigan. Michigan was never really in the game past the first quarter, and a lot of it was due to Stetson Bennett playing lights out. He had one little mental error at the end of the half with managing clock management that Kirby really got onto him about. But other than that, he was borderline perfect. Hit a couple big plays, threw just a beautiful deep ball to Jermaine Burton, another one to James Cook. He was, a little high on a couple throws just to be nitpicky, but an absolutely outstanding game for him. By far the best quarterback on the field, and it showed in a dramatic way, and I think that was something that a lot of people weren't expecting to see, and it's really good to see that out of a guy like Stetson Bennett. Another takeaway for me was that Georgia just completely dominated both lines of scrimmage. Michigan's offensive line was lauded as the best in the country. They won the Joe Moore Award. There was a lot of talk coming into this game about how they'd be able to probably run the ball with good effectiveness on Georgia from a lot of the national media types, and I heard it a lot from Michigan fans in my Michigan preview that they were going to be able to run the ball all over them. A couple people saying this game wouldn't even be close, that Michigan was going to dominate Georgia, and instead the exact opposite happened. Georgia's front seven dominated Michigan's offensive line, and it really, there's some brutal videos out there of Trayvon Walker just absolutely embarrassing Michigan's pulling center, just destroyed him on a pulling block there, and then made a tackle for a loss. And that was really the theme of the night. Georgia racked up 4 sacks and 7 tackles for a loss, consistently blowing Michigan off the ball. Jordan Davis was dominating people in the middle. Nolan Smith was killing people on the edge. Trayvon Walker had an outstanding game. Nakobe Dean played out of his mind. Clearly the best linebacker in football. Don't care what you say. Absolutely, obviously the best linebacker in football. And Michigan, they were only able to run. They ran for under 100 yards, 3.4 yards per carry, and it basically rendered their offense ineffective by itself because they were forced to throw the ball. And to me, that just further shows the domination of Georgia's front seven. And I said coming into this game, if Michigan is put in a situation where they have to throw the ball out of necessity instead of being able to throw the ball when they want to, being able to throw the ball out of luxury, they could get themselves in a really big mess early on. And the same was true of Georgia, but Georgia didn't have that issue because on the other side of the ball, Georgia's offensive line absolutely locked down Michigan's defensive line, front seven, all of it. They were able to run for 190 yards, 5 yards per carry. In a lot of ways, exposed the Michigan front seven in the run game. And you could argue that was the biggest deciding factor coming in this game. Georgia's able to run the ball for over 5 yards per carry, almost 200 yards, dominate that line of scrimmage. That keeps them on schedule. That keeps Stetson Bennett, in his groove. And then speaking of keeping Stetson Bennett in his groove, Michigan's pass rush was a complete no-show. They had 0 sacks. They only got 2 tackles for a loss, and they only had 2 hurries. Aiden Hutchinson got pancaked in an absolutely embarrassing fashion by Jamari Sawyer at one point. David Ojabo didn't even record a stat in the entire game. Hutchinson only had 1 tackle for a loss. I think that was his only tackle of the game. And it was on a screen pass, too. So it's not like he got into the backfield even. It was on a screen pass to his side that he happened to run down. Complete and utter domination from Georgia up front on both sides of the ball, like I said. And I think that, you could argue if that or the Stetson Bennett point is the most telling point of this game. But either way you go, I don't think you would be wrong either way. Stetson Bennett being the best quarterback on the field was certainly major, but it wouldn't have mattered, I don't think, as much if Georgia didn't absolutely control both lines of scrimmage. Just dominance, pure dominance on the offensive line, pure dominance on the defensive line. It was pretty brutal. Great for me to watch as a Georgia fan, to be honest. Not at all what I expected, though. My score prediction was 27-21 Georgia over Michigan. And I was pretty close on the Georgia score with 27, and actually turned out to be 34. I didn't expect them to hit quite as many explosives as they did. I thought Michigan would be a little bit more effective. I thought that their run game I had basically pegged. I thought it would be slightly more effective, not much. I thought their pass game would be a lot more effective. I thought they would actually be able to block the pass rush a little bit. They had the best offensive line in the country, supposedly. And I thought they'd do decent enough. You couple that with the fact that they were the most explosive offense in the country coming into that game, and I figured they could get to 21. That made sense to me. Come to find out, they really couldn't. They got to 11, but 8 of those came in absolute garbage time against all backups. They really got to 3, and it wasn't even a game for most of it. Pretty early on, you could tell Michigan did not know what to do with Georgia up front. They couldn't handle their size and speed up front. And with the kind of offense they run, there's just no way you can expect an offense who's almost 3-2 run to pass to have to throw their way through the entire game with no run game to be successful. And so my next big takeaway in the game was that the Georgia staff honestly outcoached the Michigan staff. And I'm not one to criticize specific play calling, particularly because all of these coaches know way more about football than any of us criticizing them do. We're not in any position to critique any of these coaches for their specific play calling, really not even so much for their game planning. None of us know nearly as much as any of these coaches do. But when you look at the overall results, Georgia was clearly the much better coached team. I mean, Michigan had 3 turnovers. They looked out of sorts all night, almost kind of like the big stage had got to them to some extent. Meanwhile, Georgia came in, had a laser focus. They came out way more focused, way more intense than Michigan the whole way, and it showed. I mean, if you look, even at the end of the game, the players are going to give Kirby Smart a Gatorade bath, and Kirby shut it down because he's like, look, we have another game. This is all business. We're not here to celebrate. We are here to win a game, move on to the national championship, and we're going to try to do our best to win that one. We're not here to celebrate. And to me, that really carries over into how the team played. They showed up, they looked completely focused, completely intense, and they played like it. They were incredible, like I said, focus, intensity, and it was just absolutely a much better performance than Michigan in all 3 phases of the game. Even their trick plays, which you hear so much about how well Michigan has done this year with their trick plays, fitting in wrinkles with Josh Gaddis, that they've really been the best in the country at that. And you look at it, they ran one flea flicker that didn't work, really. They took a dump down off of it. Other than that, I can't think of any real trickery that they tried to pull off. Georgia, however, they run a halfback pass, goes for a touchdown, and that's really the only trick play they needed that put them up 14-0 at the time. So Georgia did better with that. If you look at the game plans, I feel like Georgia did a little bit better, but I'm not really going to get into breaking that down because, again, look, I don't know what Michigan and Georgia's actual game plans were. I just know what I saw. And Georgia just clearly looked like the better prepared team in all 3 phases. And to me, that comes down to coaching. That's what I will judge coaching on. Not so much on schematic decisions because I don't feel like I'm in a position to give good enough insight on schematic decisions that these teams are making at this level of football. They know better than I do. They know better than most, if not all of you guys do. But when you look at how prepared a team is to play, do they handle the moment? How focused are they? How disciplined are they? I feel like that's pretty easy to judge with coaching, and Georgia absolutely outperformed them, which I think is even more important, especially because all I've heard going into this game is that Harbaugh is a better on-field coach than Kirby Smart, and that Michigan's the best team in the country at making adjustments and fitting wrinkles into the offense and all that. And they actually meet up. Georgia completely outplayed and outcoached them in all phases of the game. I think it's a very important point to notice, especially because of all the hate that Kirby Smart consistently receives for somehow people don't think he's a good on-the-field coach. I don't understand it. Anyway, the next takeaway for me was that Georgia's talent and depth advantage were on display. And so Michigan's star players, they didn't show up and dominate. And when that happened, they didn't have anyone else to turn to. They didn't have another pitch to go to, for example. I mean, for Georgia, you look at, they have a guy like a Jermaine Burton, steps up, scores a deep touchdown. James Cook, who's kind of the lead back, but not really, splits time as the running back. He went absolutely crazy, had over 100 receiving yards, had a touchdown. Zamir White had a very good game. Kenny McIntosh had a very good game. A.D. Mitchell, true freshman wide receiver, comes in. He gets 2 catches and a touchdown. Brock Bowers shows up, has 5 catches and a touchdown, and he played very well. But the point is, Bowers didn't have a crazy performance. George Pickens didn't have a crazy performance. He only had 1 catch for 9 yards, and yet it didn't really matter because of just how deep and talented Georgia is across the board. You look at defensively. Yeah, Nakobe Dean showed out as he always does, but it wasn't just him. It's guys like Nolan Smith, Trayvon Walker, Robert Beal got in there, got a sack. Derion Kendrick has 2 picks. Others also, I mean, lots of other guys, that's just a few names, all played very well. That doesn't even mention a guy like Jordan Davis or a Channing Tindall or a Quay Walker who absolutely rocked McCarthy on a late quarterback run. That doesn't even mention any of those guys. And the point is that when Aiden Hutchinson and Ojabo had a game like in Miami where they get shut down by Georgia's offensive line, their defense fell apart. And then when their star running backs got shut down, the run game got shut down, their offense fell apart. But for Georgia, there were options past the big stars, past the big names that all contributed in massive ways to the win. Chris Smith, for example, goes out for a targeting penalty, and we bring in a walk-on safety in Dan Jackson who comes in. Georgia's defense doesn't miss a beat. They keep going. And I think partially you credit that to coaching and development and keeping all your guys ready to play, but also it's largely due to, like I said, the talent gap and the depth gap, which I got absolutely killed in my comment section of my preview video for mentioning. I mentioned that Georgia is the more talented team. Everybody lost their minds about how stars don't matter. It's all overrated. Talent isn't all that important in this kind of thing. And yet you look at the game, and it looks pretty freaking important, okay? Georgia's 2s and 3s were just as good as their 1s, and Michigan's weren't. I mean, Georgia looked like clearly the more talented team that night, and it becomes obvious the difference between Georgia's talent level, not just at the top end, because at the top end you can kind of get away with it, but at the depth, you know, when your top guys don't show up and show out, and you have to go to your second and third string guys, Michigan didn't have a chance at that point, and Georgia just kept rolling dudes out there. And I think that is a huge discrepancy and something that really was obvious and shown through on the field. And that's the difference between recruiting at Georgia's level of a 1, 2, or a 3 class every single year and recruiting at Michigan's level of hanging around the 10 to 15 range, sometimes breaking into the near the 5 range. But for the most part, they hang out around 10. There's a difference there. There's a noticeable difference there. And the difference is what you saw on the field in the Orange Bowl. I mean, that is the difference between recruiting at the elite level and recruiting at a very good level. And so my final takeaway for this game was just the insane level of early down success Georgia was able to have. This is also true of the game as a whole. Georgia scored in their first 5 drives with the first playoff team to ever do that. But my point here specifically is about first down success. Georgia was consistently able to stay on schedule, avoid third and long situations, avoided negative plays, and particularly did that on first down. They didn't get behind the sticks, and that allowed them to dictate to the defense and control if they wanted to run or to pass, which is crucial to Georgia's offensive success. Similar situation happened in the Alabama-Cincinnati game, but it's way more important for Georgia to stay on schedule because they're not the most explosive offense out there. Now, they had a couple big explosive plays in this game, but that's not standard for them. And you know, being able to stay on script, stay on schedule, avoid negative plays, and Georgia was able to do that with absolute incredible rate this game. That's huge for Georgia. That's huge for any team, but particularly for Georgia. And Michigan couldn't do this for their offense. I mean, largely due to their offensive line play. They couldn't keep the run game going to keep the defense off guard, keep them guessing, run pass. They gave up a lot of negative plays, a lot of tackles for loss, a lot of sacks, kept them into pretty bad third and long situations frequently. You combine that with 3 turnovers, and it becomes pretty obvious to me why Georgia's offense was just so much more effective than Michigan's offense was. But with all that being said, Michigan definitely deserved to be here. There's no real debate that they didn't. They're a team that had an outstanding season, and that should be commended. I mean, they won the Big Ten, they beat Ohio State, and they made the playoffs. That's still an absolutely outstanding season despite losing in the semifinals. Anyway, if you've made it this far in the video, go ahead, leave a like because it helps me out tremendously. Also, subscribe to the channel for more content like this in the future, and let me know what your thoughts were on this game, the outcome, and each team individually. Anything related to this content, let me know down below in the comment section. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.